Welcome to the Listen Up podcast, where we explore hearing loss, communication, connections, and health.
Hey everybody, Dr. Mark Sims here. I'm the host of Listen Up podcast, where I feature top leaders in healthcare. This episode is brought to you by Listen Up Hearing Center. I help patients to effectively treat their hearing loss so that they can remain independent and better connected with friends and family. The reason I'm so passionate about hearing loss is I lost my brother Robbie twice. First, the hearing loss from radiation to his brain tumor, and then when he passed away. I only care for ears. I'm the E of ENT. I performed over 10,000 ear surgeries and taken care of many more with hearing loss. I'm also the founder of Listen Up Hearing Center, and I've written a book of the same name, Listen Up, A Physician's Guide to Effectively Treating Your Hearing Loss. If you want to learn more about that, go to listenuphearing.com. That's listenuphearing.com. Today, I have a great guest. It's Kaitlin Walsh. She's an artist specializing in abstract anatomical watercolor and oil paintings. I stumbled across some of her paintings on the internet and want to learn more. From a young age, she exhibited immense fascination in both art and medicine. She graduated with a degree in biomedical visualization at University of Illinois at Chicago, where she took a combination of fine art and med school courses. Her primary motivation to entirely focus her career on this passion portraying the beauty and complexity of the human body through painting is when her firstborn spent several months in the hospital recovering from severe prenatal complications and early birth. Her son's initially precarious health status, while frightening, also compelled her to further appreciate the intricacies of functional anatomy. After spending some time honing her craft and increasing her inventory, she launched her studio Lyon Road Art in 2015. She sold over 5,000 prints of her work and is well known in the anatomical art community, which is a very small niche community, I assume. I mean, how many people are there doing anatomical art? Do you know? Around.
There used to be nobody. I felt like I was one of the first. Now I have wonderful, great competition out there, but I would say, maybe like 50 of us out there.
So when you say anatomical art, you mean people who are doing artwork where the anatomy is the subject matter as compared to anatomically correct. Like, so Frank Netter, for instance, is the most famous anatomical artist.
Right. I would consider that illustration versus fine art.
Right. Because that is a attempt to represent how it really is as compared to an artistic interpretation. Is that a fair statement?
Yep.
Okay. And so tell me a little about that your major is not common, I suspect.
No.
So, what was your thought process in terms of where that would be? Or so it sounds like you've always been wanting to be in this particular space. Is that correct?
Yep. I've always, like you said, I always had a fascination with both art and science. When I was little, I painted and colored and drew every day of my life through middle school and high school. But then I started getting super interested in anatomy. I blame my grandpa. He used to quiz us on anatomy. And if we remembered the interesting facts he told us, he would give us a nickel the next time. Yeah, it was good. So he made them into stories like Sella Turcica on the sphenoid means Turkish saddle and it cradles the pituitary. So interesting. So it gave me this fascination, so much so that I, for a little bit, wanted to go pre-med, but I missed art too much. And so I was frustrated enough that I was Googling careers that could combine art and medicine. And then I found out there are a couple of grad schools that offer that exact thing as a program. And I was stuck. I knew that's what I was going to do with my life.
And so what is that like? In other words, the training, in other words, what does it, I mean,
it's great. These programs do such a nice job because they paired us up with or put us in classes with dental students, PT students, and med students. So we're taking the same classes. And then we dissections in a cadaver lab. We got to be right in there with them. And then we were able to take fine art classes that allow us to focus on those things. But what was fantastic was being able to see things from a clinical perspective. So I know what I'm seeing, which parts are relevant to your average clinician, which is important.
Yeah. And so what's your process? In other words, I assume some of it you create yourself. In other words, there's areas that are of your interest, and then some of them are probably areas of other people's interest. Is that correct?
Yep, absolutely. I would say 90% of the time I'm working on commissions. So that doesn't leave a lot of time these days for my own inspiration, but that's okay. That's what every artist strives for, right? To be wanted. But so I either think of something or I get commissioned to paint something. And then the process is all about the source material. So I'm looking for both accuracy when I'm trying to find that source material, and then something that hits me or inspires me. Like I said, Celatrisca is really cool. And so if I was looking for something, the idea needs to be, and what I'm portraying needs to be accurate, but I also need to find an image that really catches me, that it's like this orientation is particularly beautiful. If I throw these colors on it, I can really, really make it pop. So I'm searching for those two things. And I also have to be careful not to copy anything. So usually I have multiple sources up at once, books, websites. So I'm not, I'm careful that I'm not copying anything too directly, and it helps me be that much more accurate.
So you mean like perhaps different perspectives of the same anatomical structure or something of that nature?
If you look up a specific structure, everybody's drawn it or painted it or created it slightly differently. So, which is correct. I can either go to a cadaver lab or I can kind of average what I see or go off the sources that I trust.
And then, so do you draw it properly, or how do you go, do you represent it properly?
I vary. It depends on what people are requesting. Properly, I love to do. It's almost easier because I just kind of paint what I see and know what it's supposed to look like. But sometimes I like to do a really creative bend to it. I call it the wink wink paintings, where it's like the clinician, the provider, or person commissioning it knows what it is, but to anybody else, it just looks like an abstract painting. And those can be a lot of fun, but they take a lot of thought, and I have to really decide how I'm going to portray it in that abstract way. Like I'm painting, right before this, I was painting progesterone. Like how?
You mean the molecule?
The molecule, yes. So how do I make that cool and abstract and fun? So it's just kind of big and splashy, bold colors, big shapes, those hexagons and pentagons. So
how do you do that?
Big swatches of color, like focusing on the shapes and making all the hexagons and those pentagons accurately placed, but kind of overlapping a little bit. So it just looks, like an abstract.
Which is kind of interesting, right? Because the molecular representation is also indeed that. In other words, it's a system we use to represent molecules, but probably not the way the molecule actually is, right? So that's kind of an interesting, right? So the molecular, I think, is definitely challenging. How about anatomically? Like, do you try to do those in an abstract phase too, as well?
Absolutely. My very first one I did, is still one of my favorites, is the brachial plexus. So it's just, it looks like such a random braiding of just wavy lines basically on the page, but I painted them in a very specific way, and that's very indicative of anatomy. If anybody looked at the brachial plexus in a cadaver lab, it just looks like a big mess of nerves, but everything is put together so meticulously in that specific braided way. And that idea of that it looks like a hot mess, but it's actually very particular lends itself great to abstractness, because abstract expressionism is, seemingly so random, but I like meaning behind what looks seemingly random.
Right. So meaning and beauty behind what doesn't look like it has an organization or a purpose.
Exactly. Thank you. You said it better.
Right. And so and so, and how about the colors? I mean, obviously, live tissue has more vibrant colors than cadaveric tissue, but I wouldn't say it's particularly vibrant. So like whatever's behind you is way more vibrant than most things that I would say are in the body in terms of experientially.
The fiddle bone is behind me. Yes, colors I have to be very careful on, because I know my target audience is looking for something. A lot is patient facing what they're looking for, and they do not want patients to see the color red. Also, stay away from gangrene colors.
Right.
Dentist office don't want yellow because it messes with when they're trying to match teeth. So I have to pick my colors carefully because of those parameters. And then I also, when I get the chance, I just try to choose bright and vibrant, because otherwise it's just what people see all the time. Sometimes that's the only thing that makes it look abstract, like painting the middle ear, but doing it in bright turquoises is enough to be like, yeah, that's different and cool.
Well, I mean, the piece behind you, I think, is purple and orange or red, perhaps.
Yep,
Right?
maybe orange and red. Yeah.
Yeah. And so that in and of itself, obviously, especially, I mean, the purple blue could theoretically be venous blood, but it's not that blue, and it's not that. So that definitely has a vibrancy to it, right?
Right. But even these were ones I did for myself. It's my pet project to paint all the bones in the body. But I would never paint unless somebody specifically requested red. I would never get to paint a commission this color. That's why I often choose it when I get to choose.
Do you have that much wall space? There's a lot of bones in the body.
I'm working on it.
Unless you're going to do like the whole hand together.
Some are in storage, some have sold, and my favorites I get to hang up by me.
Oh, okay. Because I was going to say they're a heck of a lot, right? So
yeah, I'm going to combine the some of them.
And what medium do you typically work in?
Typically, I do watercolor. I say it's a great medium for moms because it's easy setup, easy tear down. Kids can't make a mess of it. So, and that's kind of what I've become known for. And I can produce watercolor relatively quickly, especially since a lot of the watercolor effects you can only achieve by moving quickly. It needs to be wet. But when I get a chance to work on a pet project, I usually, the bones and other things I like to render in oil. Those just take months, and they're way messier and way more arduous, and you need specific chemicals for them. So when I get a chance, I do oil, but I'm better known and a big producer of watercolor. And watercolor is great.
So let's talk about your timeline. Okay, so somebody calls you up, they want to do I don't mean the actual passage of time. I mean your investment in time. I think people sometimes underestimate how much time and work there is involved in, because they just kind of look at, okay, great, I'm glad you did that. But so the whole process, somebody says to you, I want to do something. And so how does that look like? So can you go through kind of the whole process from start to finish?
Yep. It's a 4-week turnaround time. And I stick to that pretty well. When people put in a commission, you get into my queue. And a lot of that time is research on the subject matter, going back and forth with the customer to make sure we have the same style and the same plan moving forth. I don't like to do sketches for people, mostly because with watercolor, it's just hard to convey the effect that it'll just mess people up and give them different expectations. So I always produce something, and then if you want me to repaint it, I'm willing to repaint it. The painting of it, I work on painting simultaneously because of a lot of effects happen at specific times in the drawing process. So I don't mean like two on the same day. I mean, like I literally have them side by side on the table, and I'm jumping from one to the other.
Oh, interesting.
Because I'm waiting for one to dry. Well, then I can get the effect on the other one. And then it has to dry. Some have to dry completely so I can layer things on top. So because of that sporadic process, I jump around between projects, and the whole painting, and then scanning it in and getting a snapshot for the customer, and matting it and sending it usually takes about 4 weeks.
Do you do pencil before, or do you just do it freehand watercolor?
I do a very minimal sketch. The basic parameters, basically, then once I have it sketched out, I know where I can deviate from. My final paintings look nothing like my sketch, but it's a starting off point. But since watercolor is so translucent and shows through, I'd have to erase a lot if I did a lot of sketching anyway. And I like flying by the seat of my pants.
Have you ever done a time-lapse photography of your project?
Oh, lots. I put a lot of them up on Instagram. You kind of have to, as an artist, to maintain a social media presence to show what you do. I find it very stressful. Painting is relaxing and fun, and I love it. But as soon as I know a camera's on here, it's like, oh, the person's going to be bored if I spend so much time on this one area. So I do it once in a while, but I don't do it on every painting.
Okay, that's great. And so what are the sizes of your pieces usually?
The standard sizes we offer just match up with standard frame sizes. So if somebody puts a commission in, the options on my site would be 5x7, 8x10, 11x14, and 16x20. When I paint for myself or for sometimes...
That's way bigger than a 16x20 behind you.
Right. So when I paint for myself, I go big. A lot of these go into competitions, and I found bigger's better. It gets the attention a little bit more for art shows and things like that. And if I'm helping to fill up a clinic, they're often wanting bigger pieces. Watercolor paper comes in size 22 by 30. So that's what I often, that's a personal favorite size to paint in.
Okay. And so I was about to say, I assume a decent amount of your art is publicly displayed, or at least places where the public can get to.
Yes. My favorite thing is when my husband and I, we've moved a lot. He was in the military for a while. And so I know people around the country and they'll just text me, I was at the doctor's and I saw one of your paintings. So that always feels good. And yes, they go in shows here and there, which is always exciting.
Oh, that's great. And so what's the furthest geography? Do you know where your pieces are the furthest away?
I'm proud to say it's harder to find a place where my pieces aren't. And those are prints, not originals. Originals are usually stateside. They're just harder to ship. But I'm in every continent except Antarctica. Just shipped a big one to South Africa, Middle East, Asia.
The prints are different, right? So the prints can be requested in different sizes and formats, I assume?
Yes, exactly. Yep. So the prints are different. Originals go through a different process, but then you get the original painting with my signature on. And those are mostly stateside or sent several to Europe and Australia and Canada.
So if people want to look at your work, where would they go?
Not just to my website.
No, they don't. I mean, yes. What is your website and where would they go? Like, what would that be? You can
LyonRoadArt.com, Lyon. Lyon.
And what's the origin of that name? Are you on Lyon Road?
That's where I became a grown-up, if you will. I lived on Lyon Road out in California. I got married, and then that night went on a honeymoon, and from there moved to California from Chicago, where I was in grad school, and then got my first big girl job. And then 2 weeks later, found out I was pregnant. And then like 8 weeks after that, found out that there were huge issues with my pregnancy and all these, and my husband was in a really difficult residency. So a lot of things happened all at once. And I just had to grow up, and it was very challenging. But
accelerated, it sounds like.
Accelerated. Everything happened all at once. It seems like a different person now. But yeah, it's a big, those things will change you. So I only lived there for a year, but that was when most of the big events in my life happened. So that's why I named my business Lyon Road Art.
That's great. And so of all the pieces you've done, what is the favorite, top 3 things that you've rendered in terms of structures?
My sphenoid bone, which sold, and that was hard to say yes to that sale. But I love the sphenoid. That one story about my grandpa, the sphenoid, he loved the sphenoid, so I did. And then it's just an interesting bone anatomically. And it's just plain beautiful because it looks like a butterfly. So I have one that's this big of the sphenoid that sold. I have a heart dissection one. I have a series where I painted that I just wanted to do on my own. They were displayed at a hospital in Wisconsin for a long time. But since they're based off just dissections, and dissections are, they are gross. There's no way around it. So I love taking those photographs of the straight up dissections and making something beautiful from it. So it was just a matter of different orientations for this. It was dissection of the heart, doing a zoom in, and using a different palette, and all of a sudden it goes from gross to like super interesting. And is that a real thing, or is that an abstract painting? And I have one of the hearts, and then one of the orbit that I love. That's an eyeball, but it looks more like a flower. So
yeah. Well, I'm obviously partial to the temporal bone, being that I'm an ear doctor, but it's a very complex bone, but it does not have the symmetry like this
behind its TV. But that one won a big award in Iowa once, but that's the big rendering of the temporal bone.
Oh, that's great. That's wonderful. So why was your grandfather so interested in the temporal bone? I mean, the sphenoid bone?
He liked the temporal bone too. I think it's just that cool story of the cella turcica that it was named the turcica.
But was he an anatomist or what was it?
He was a dentist, but like me, we just have this weird thing in our DNA. Like we just find it fascinating. Like I don't think my brothers and sisters care as much as I do, but he and I could just, we still try to top one another in like interesting little anatomical factoids. He just had a really good memory and liked to.
That's great. No, I just was kind of curious. It's not typical, I think, grandparent, grandchild fodder. So it's a little unusual, but it's great. It sparked a passion in you, which I think is really wonderful. I mean, the stuff behind you is really amazing and really beautiful. So, I mean, that's what drew me to, I was like, there's got to be people out there doing this type of stuff. And I stumbled across your stuff. And so I thought, I'll invite her to talk about the process, because I think the process is really fascinating in terms of how you guys get from, what is considered the real rendering anatomically to doing something artistic. I think that's the jump that is hard for me to understand, and actually not any fault to you. It's kind of hard for you to explain because it's just kind of, I figure out what it is and then do it a different way. Right.
And I still will remember stories told in anatomy class and in grad school. And it's just like things that were interesting from a clinical perspective. And because it was so interesting from a clinical perspective, I remembered it and made me latch onto it. And I just wanted to make it interesting visually as well. I mean, how the fingers move, the tendons of the fingers are just kind of special and different. And the cone and the eardrum, I can't remember the specific name, but they just stick out in my mind because my professors would spend extra time on it. So then I want to spend time on it too.
Well, I mean, isn't that kind of art, right? Taking something that people understand and rendering it in a different way that makes it beautiful or interesting, right? I mean, but although I will say, if you look at Netter's work, for instance, it's beautiful in and of itself, right? I mean,
absolutely.
His work is pretty amazing.
His work is astonishing, just his different vantage points. You could tell he was a clinician first and an artist second, just because the views that he took were just so helpful. And then the final rendering is so beautiful. Yes, I love
There's actually a medical school named after him now.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Connecticut.
Very cool.
Yeah.
His daughter came to speak, or granddaughter or daughter came to speak at one of our at our school.
Yeah, that's really great. So Kaitlin, what's your favorite sound?
Oh, rain. That one's really simple for me. I crave it. I love rain. I lived in California for a while, and during a drought season, which it always is, it's and drought, I found out means really beautiful every day. And dang it, I didn't love it. I miss the sound of the rain. So when it's raining out, I don't feel like I need to be outside. I always feel like I'm supposed to be outside when it's beautiful. So rainy days are my happy place. So that one's easy.
Yeah, everybody, this is Kaitlin Walsh. She's an artist who does abstract anatomical watercolors and oil paintings. And again, Kaitlin, if people want to get a hold of you, how would they do that? What is your website and how would they get a hold of you?
Sure. It's lyonroadart.com, LYONROADART.com. And if you Googled my name too, Kaitlin Walsh, that will pop up. But Caitlin's hard to spell, so good luck with that.
Well, I've been to the website. The work is really beautiful. And I think people should go take a look and check it out, because there's really some amazing artwork on there that is really just a beautiful rendering of the human body and anatomy and molecules. I know you do as well. So it's really cool stuff. So I appreciate the work you do. I think it's pretty amazing. And congratulations for just kind of going out and doing it and making it viable.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Coming on. This has been great. So everybody, again, it's Kaitlin Walsh. You can go check out her website. And if you want to connect her, I think they can probably connect to you with LinkedIn, or there's a contact form too.
Okay. Yep. And Facebook and Instagram. We answer all.
Instagram and Facebook, right? Sorry, I want to be visual. So, all right. This has been great. Thanks, Kaitlin, for coming on. I really appreciate your time.
All right. Thanks so much. Have a good one.
Thanks for tuning in to the Listen Up podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get updates on future episodes.